Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, which is Dr. Paul Quinnett. I'm not going to go through his extensive CV. The CV is in your program booklet, so I encourage you to have a look at that and read through it. But to say that Paul has been a tireless voice in suicide prevention for over 30 years, particularly through his work through QPR and now the exciting program QPR in sport. He's well published. He's published 7 books, and one may think that he is a little obsessive writing that many books, but you'll be pleased to know that he's a balanced man because 2 of those books were on fly fishing. So Paul comes to us from the States, so please give Paul Quinnett a warm and wet Sydney welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hear you've had a drought here, and this is helping. And we've had droughts as well. I very much appreciate being asked to speak to this group. And as you note in my CV, as a young man, I worked in the construction trades between going to college and had to dodge a few earth movers. I was a surveyor, and we had a nickname for ourselves. We worked in the California deserts out on the outback of the U.S., as it were. And we called ourselves SIs. You know what an SI is, surveyor? It's a sunburned idiot. What I'm going to do today and talk with you about is here we go. The title of my talk is Why Can't a Man Be More Like a Woman? And what would Charles Darwin have to say about male help-seeking behavior? Because as many of you know, one of our social marketing messages is that what we need to do to reduce male suicide is to get men to ask for help. And if they would just do that, we would give them the help they need and they wouldn't have to die by their own hand. I want to suggest to you that it'll be easier for men to grow another thumb than it will be to start asking for help. So, what's a nice guy like me doing in a place like this? This is an introduction to warrior psychology and what I think it will take to prevent male suicide. To prevent male suicide, we first have to understand this guy. This guy look familiar? That's the warrior. And these grandfathers, these are ancient Egyptian warriors. And this guy, who is an Apache warrior, if you don't recognize Geronimo, he was the Apaches never lost their 200-year war with America. They actually ended up winning, as it were. They were never finally defeated. And we have to understand this guy, the samurai warrior, and these guys, because these guys are all these guys now. This is how we've redivided our tribalism, is to become parts of sports teams, which is a very, very good thing. Except for rugby, there's a lot less bloodshed now in most contact sports. We have to understand these guys because all the warriors are still fighting, but they're just fighting with shedding less blood. I come from a sporting family. I have granddaughters who play Division I basketball at the college level. My middle son, who is our training director, was a super athlete in college and high school and went on to play in the National Basketball Association for 3 years with the New York Knicks. So I've been around basketball and sports a whole lot in my life. Since men do most of the dying by suicide, and it's 3 to 4 times the rate compared to females, a review of warrior psychology is in order, in my view. And women now in traditional male roles are also beginning to pick up some of the same risky behaviors that lead to male suicide. So we have to explore this a little bit, I think, because we can't fix a problem we don't understand. And to understand how men operate and how men work and what makes them tick, we have to get into their brains and how, in my view, they evolve to be the kind of chaps they are. So I'm going to explore the evolution of warriors and why suicidal men don't ask for help. I want to look to alternatives to current suicide prevention, social marketing strategies, and look at some new solutions. I feel a bit like I'm talking to the choir here because you've done so much of this already. But let me proceed. Here's a fact. We have always been at war. Studies show that 31 current hunter-gatherer societies on the planet, 64% engage in warfare once every 2 years, 26 fought wars less often, and only 10% were described as not being in battles and wars, either rarely or never. A few things about tribal war. All war was to the death. It was all genocidal. It was male-on-male aggression and is now considered a universal human trait. It has always been us versus them. The male warrior hypothesis argues that the ultimate purpose of intergroup conflict is to gain access to the resources and the other guy's fauna, food, and females, where hunting grounds equal the fauna. Intergroup violence, combat war, football, rugby is all about us versus them. We are in the in group. This is us and our guys, and the out group is them and their guys. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just saying it's reality on the ground. In prehistory, the first question a warrior has to ask yourself, is this our guy or their guy? Your life depends on it. This is our guy or the enemy. Warrior survival depends on some basic functions. The instant recognition of the enemy, to know if this other fellow is a friend, foe, or unknown. This is the universal peace greeting. Sorry, that's not working very well here. Yep. There we go. This is the universal peace greeting. We all saw it in Star Trek, the open right hand, no weapon in this hand. It's how we shake hands to show that we're not intending any harm to anybody. The handshake is confirmation that the guy doesn't intend to kill you. You know, Canadians are known for being so very nice, and I got to tell you, there's only one cab driver has asked me about the man in this picture since I've been here, so it's very, very nice that you're so polite. To prevent male suicide now, we rely on encouraged male help-seeking behavior. This is James Bond making a hotline call. Oh my, there we go. So here's my thesis, and I mentioned it earlier, men will start growing an extra thumb before they start asking for help. And there, I found this on the web, there actually is a guy growing a second thumb. So here's what we deal with now. After a male suicide in a place we work or someone we know, it is not enough to say he should have asked for help, or mental health services were there for him. He had the crisis line number because I gave it to him. This is all so much nonsense in my view, because if I look at the numbers across the US and here and elsewhere, males are killing themselves at even greater numbers than ever before. So please accept this reality that the next male suicide you hear about will not be prevented by passive availability of counseling services, crisis line numbers, posters, wallet cards, passive employee assistance programs that say call us, and so forth. Now, I will give you this. There is growing data that more men are asking for help, and that's a good thing. Looking at the skulls of men from 50,000 years ago, our skulls were a lot thicker and we had much higher testosterone levels. So ladies were gradually improving, getting softer skulls and lower testosterone levels. But it might be prevented by trained observers of pre-incident suicide risk indicators that someone's headed into trouble and we can intervene before they have to make a suicide attempt. And as you know, most male suicide attempts are fatal. Male suicide is preventable if you learn male suicide warning signs and know how to jump right in with both feet. To not know warning signs is stupid. And life is hard. It's harder if you're stupid. John Wayne. So we got two problems. One, there are no published studies that show any social marketing strategies increase vulnerable male help-seeking behaviors. And 2, being male, just being a male, is the greatest barrier to help-seeking behavior. Men not asking for help means that we suffer from more untreated psychiatric illnesses. We suffer more unintentional injuries and premature death. We have more HIV/AIDS, more liver disease, heart attacks, smoking, binge drinking, high blood pressure, colorectal cancer, homicides, suicides, and we win all the Darwin Awards. You recall the Darwin Awards. Oops. Where am I supposed to point this thing? Sorry about that. So what is it about men anyway? This is an APA report from our Psychological Association talking about a challenge in male psychology, and that is the top 3 topics were these, and challenges in help-seeking behavior. So from a social psychological point of view, our Psychological Association in the US identifies male help-seeking as a problem. And I get that, and we tend to socialize the reason men are the way they are, the way they're raised, versus rather that they might have evolved to be what they are. So we've been farmers and living in villages and cities and such only about 10 to 12,000 years. So for the first 1.5 million years that we were human beings, we were living in tribal groups. We were hunters and warriors, and women were gatherers. And I don't mean to be sexist here, I'm just looking at the evolutionary data. Natural selection determines these gender differences. Boys are made different. You all know that boys have trouble with speech. They lack an emotional vocabulary. We blame men because they can't talk about their feelings. Well, if you look at the way their brains are structured compared to women's, the road between women's feelings and her words is a big, wide freeway. For men, it's a little dirt path. We have a hard time expressing our emotions, but we shouldn't be blamed for it. Men use 7 times fewer words than women and girls, and there's a reason. You take a guy out hunting, and if he can't keep his mouth shut, you never kill anything. And if you never kill anything because you're making too much noise in the woods, you don't bring any protein home, and you're useless as a hunter. Here's some things that men do well: throwing, navigating, chess, exploring wild places, map reading, architecture, bridge building, construction, and mechanics. That's why Legos rule. If you're buying little boys' toys, buy them Legos. For millions of years, natural selection favored males who were good at hunting and fighting. If you can't bring home the bacon and kill the other guy in a fight before he kills you, you don't get the girl. And if you don't get the girl, you don't get to swim in the gene pool. And what happens if you don't get the girl or you can't keep her? That's the single greatest crisis for triggering a male suicide, is a relationship breakup. This is data from our Department of Defense looking at soldier suicides, and almost half of them were triggered by the breakup of a primary love relationship. So what does natural selection do to select men who don't ask for help? Human History 101, as warriors defending our tribes and territory, and with very few exceptions, we engaged in constant warfare. Research on this is very clear. Their ancient ancestors, studies of their broken bones, the lodging of arrow points in their bodies and so forth. We lost up to 60% of young men died in combat before they ever married. Up to 60%. If you can imagine, as a soldier, if you go out with 100 men and you come back with 40, that's not a good day in combat. Some studies, half of all young men died of violent wounds. Oop. There we go. So all men who were warriors, many could not marry until they had been blooded in battle, and losing a fight usually meant a violent death. So what does all this mean? It means that for every male sitting in this room today, it was your great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy who won the fight. Not the other guy. The other guy isn't in the gene pool. Men worked in teams in our ancient past. We had teamwork then, we have teamwork now. That's the construction workers on the Empire State Building. You'll notice all the safety equipment. In hunting, and I'm a hunter, unless you plan to eat this one all by yourself, you need your mates. If you're hunting in my country in North Idaho, and you kill a big elk like this, and there are other hunters in the woods, they will come and help you. They will stop their own hunting and help you pack that out. And what do you do at the end of that? you share the meat. So you have reciprocity, sharing, and support. Evolution is not about just survival, it's about reproduction. No sex, there's no gene replication, and no evolution. This is reproductive fitness, Viagra sales, Australian version. I found it on the web. About to go swimming in the gene pool there. You're familiar with selfish gene theory. The only thing that matters is reproduction. To reproduce, you must survive long enough to have sex at least once. More is better. If your genes don't replicate themselves, you risk becoming a burden to your tribe. Where have we heard burdensome as a risk factor for suicide? A burden to your tribe. Big antlers in male selection. Men with big antlers, muscles, narrow waist, broad shoulders, good teeth, and who are proven good hunters get the girls. The more girls you get, the more genes you spread, and so forth. He is a father to his people. 16 million men in Europe carry, and some in this room carry the genes of this single greatest warrior in history, and some of you may know him as the Genghis Khan, who had untold numbers of concubines and wives and fathered hundreds of children. So if your genes do not replicate themselves, you end up in the dustbin of history along with all the other losers, biologically speaking. Beauty is much more than skin. It is reproductive fitness. It is, I am an able mate to you to spread your genes. I'm not going to go through this slide. This just has to do with attractive faces signal reproductivity and the research on things that go along with being attracted to people, from sperm quality to grip strength and so forth. If you had not yet had sex in your life, your job as a male is to protect your gene pool. You would give your life for your son. Would you give half your life for your nephew? That's how that formula works. If you look at who saves lives in dangerous rescues, 95% of the saves are by men. And on those saves, 10% of them die trying to save somebody else's life. And to the degree it's a stranger that they're saving is a wonderful mark on our capacity as warriors to defend and protect others. There are some primary survival skills for all primates, and that's freeze, fight, and flee. What do we all fear? Heights, spiders, snakes. And why did Moses wander 40 years in the desert? Huh? Because he had to ask this guy for directions. That's a stranger. Stranger fear begins at 2 and never goes away. We're always slightly wary of strangers. You trust but verify. And when you are suicidal, a male who is suicidal and feeling a burden, who can he trust? That's the question I want you to think about. So here are the rules for warrior survival. Do not get lost. That's why they teach map reading in boot camp. Be ready to freeze, fight, or flee. And if you get lost, do not ask strangers for directions. So again, who's your daddy? Your ancient male fathers were not the guys who got lost in the woods, walked up to strangers and said, "Hi, I'm a little turned around here. Can you direct me back to my village?" No, your father was someone like Daniel Boone. I was never lost once, but I was powerfully bewildered once for 3 days. That was Daniel Boone in Indian country when he was asked if he ever got lost. And the reason Daniel Boone had so many descendants is that he never bothered to ask a Cherokee enemy for directions on how to get back to his cabin. So what happens to lost men? And I'm talking here metaphorically about suicidal men who become lost. The Bible says in Galatians that the lost stranger, an Ephraimite, then said unto them, "Say now Shibboleth," and he said Sibboleth, and he could not frame to pronounce it right. They took him and slew him. The U.S. Marine Corps, Korean War, used Abraham Lincoln as their password challenge, and the correct answer was Lucky Strikes, and if you didn't get it right, you got a burst of .50 caliber machine gun. Men asking for help means you're so stupid, incompetent, that you got lost in my woods. You didn't bring enough other guys to take out these guys. That's what we call recon and force, because perhaps you have no battle buddies. You came on my turf without enough guys to put up a fair fight. You can't say the words right, which means you don't belong here, and I have every right to kill you. Not hurt you, but kill you. Asking for directions from strangers is okay if you're a female. Better lost than ask for directions. As if it ever happened to anybody. Of course, every woman here has been driving with a male driver who's lost and won't ask for directions. Raise your hand if you're a female and that's been true. Well, we got a lot of data here. Guys don't ask for directions. Help seeking is okay for females. Help seeking is not okay for males, but help accepting is. It's like with the big elk that you killed, you can't accept help from other males. Help accepting is okay. This is a modern study, came out of the UK. Men drive 276 miles or 444K extra miles per year when they're lost. 50% of men drive for 30 minutes before asking for directions. When women are lost, they ask immediately. 12% of men never ask how to get someplace. The lifetime cost of never asking for help when driving is about $2,500 in US bucks. In leadership studies, men who ask for help are rated as more incompetent than men who don't ask for help. And that's by both men and women. So asking for help is probably the last thing most men will want to do or can do. So here's the social message that we run for suicide prevention among men. Encourage help-seeking behavior. Our U.S. message to our soldiers now in my country is, it takes the courage and strength of a warrior to ask for help. No, it takes a very stupid warrior who did not learn the lessons of his fathers and grandfathers. Every man who has to ask for help hears banjo music. You see the film Deliverance, where the city guys get lost in the country and they have to, they're set upon by some local people and raped and so forth. In that movie, the worst possible things happen. I went back there where they filmed that, and in that river gorge where they filmed it, and the best-selling t-shirt for these campers was, "Paddle faster, I hear banjo music. There are strange males after me." Okay, men are needed, but you have to ask them for help, for their help. This is an NPR news story. A suicidal, depressed, unemployed German man in his 40s was walking to a train track to step in front of a train. On the way to the tracks, he walked by an old church. Sign said, "Baritone needed." He walked in. Now a member of the choir, he said for the interview, "Except for seeing that sign, I would have killed myself." What made the difference? Somebody needed him. This was a #1 recruiting poster during World War II in the U.S. to get young men to join the military and fight in World War II. These are Australia's call to arms in World War II. Khaki clad and glad. Boys, come over here. You're wanted. You, and so forth. So when we appeal to men to do something important, they stop killing themselves. Our suicide rates in the U.S. after the Great Depression didn't go down until the wars came. And now we had jobs for them to do, things that were important to do. Men must be needed. It's an old World War II joke. Recruiter to a man with no hands. "Yes, the Army needs you, but I have no hands," says the man. And the recruiter says, "You can tell the blind guy when the bucket's full. We have a job for you. Sign me up." Men don't just need to be needed, they cannot live without being needed. So do not ask a man to ask for help. You ask him to help you. I don't know how many of you have done psychotherapy. I worked almost exclusively with men and suicidal men in my practice for 25 years when I had a limited private practice. And the easiest way to get a guy to stay alive was simply to ask him to do something that needed to be done. Can you do this? Can you do that? Because as soon as you burden them with a task responsibility that appeals to their sense of purpose, their need to be needed, they put taking their own lives on the shelf. You give every boy and man a job that matters. I looked up Australian slang for burdensome males. This is what I found. He's useless as tits on a bull. We call that a boar hog in my country. Useless as fly wire door on a submarine. I hadn't heard that one, but it sounds pretty useless. And as useless as an ashtray on a motorbike. I hadn't heard that one either. So you've all smiling. So where do men belong? Where are they needed? Well, historically, they're needed at the fishing camp and in the hunting camp. They need to be a member of a team, preferably one that wins. As a member of fraternity, Lions, Rotary, men's support clubs, groups like this one we're in right here today. As members of a military unit, team workers building anything. As a defender of the weak, and as a defender of women and children, and to be a part of anything bigger than himself. So here was the future. I think we should be thinking about the future. This was overheard conversation between two Marine Corps generals in my country. They won't call us, talking of suicidal Marines, they won't call us, but they might text us. Now what is the world of the internet? It's the DMZ. It's a demilitarized zone where men can go to get help, look for it, hide in the bushes, scout it out, not have to reveal themselves, but still gain knowledge and information that could be helpful to them. No tribe owns the DMZ. Oh, need to get going. The web is a safe commons for men, and they can travel pretty much anywhere and ask questions of strangers without penalty and without fear of being killed. Web-based behavioral health type interventions, I think, are the future. They're here now. Australia's been leading the way on this for some time now, and they've been shown to be safe and effective. There's some more stuff that will work, which is enhanced connectedness. You want to burden the hell out of at-risk men. Give them chores, duties, responsibilities, and get them into fishing, chess, swimming, tennis clubs, mentoring, protecting, coaching, working, building homes for the poor, and on and on and on. I did a lot of work for about almost 30 years consulting for law enforcement organizations in my region, including Spokane Police Department, Highway Patrol, and others. And when we had an officer who was at risk of suicide or had just gone through a traumatic event, a shooting or something, I was often, the first response of the employer was to send them home, take their badge and gun and send them home, isolate them from the very team that gave them purpose and meaning. And so the alternative that I suggested to them is have him come to work every day, have him in the shop, have him waxing cars, have him doing something on light duty, but he is not a burden now to the department. And that was a very important intervention to think about for the chiefs that I worked with, because in the past they had sent officers home who then killed themselves because they had been isolated from their mates. So here's what you can ask men is, what have you done to help your community today? Who did you protect from a bully this week? What did you build this week? What did you fix this week? Did you join a club, take a kid fishing, help someone with a flat tire? The best medicine to stop suicidal thoughts is to get off your duff and do something useful. And this is all backed up, I think, by good research now in terms of the theory of understanding the dynamics of why people become suicidal. So I suggest we change the terms from asking for help, which is weak and incompetent, to accepting help. You are strong, but not quite strong enough to lift that car out of the ditch all by yourself or pack that 800-pound elk back to camp by yourself. Accepting help means creating what's called repayment reciprocity, a good thing that stitches together communities. It's a fabric of everything. When you help somebody, they owe you a little bit. And in tribal communities, when you share the meat of a kill, it's shared equally. And if you have a bad week of hunting, your mate over here who had a good week of hunting is going to share his meat with you, and together you make it. And that communal sharing, equity, reciprocity, those are the things that make your groups thrive as caring communities. So what I think we can do for suicidal men is to rethink male strengths, play to their ancient roles and responsibilities, understand their prime functions, and reinforce these, serve them where they are, stop asking them to come for help, Make it safe for men to accept help, and most will. I've never had a guy turn down an offer of help when he was in over his head or lifting something too heavy. And stop requiring them to do the one thing they cannot do biologically. So as long as we keep repeating the phrase, encourage male help-seeking behavior, in our grant applications and public health marketing outreach efforts, suicidal men are going to keep right on dying. Hoping men will become more like women is costing us the lives of our fathers, brothers, husbands, sons, uncles, and nephews. Final note is the current suicide prevention social marketing efforts to change male help-seeking behavior, especially through shaming them, are about as useful as parachutes that open on the second bounce. For most men, it will be easier to grow that extra thumb I showed you than pick up a phone and ask for help from a stranger. And I'm going to tell you one short, brief intervention that demonstrates this. A police officer's wife that in the department I was consulting on had gotten involved in the cocaine ring, and she was busted in their home with cocaine in the home. She had the kids, and he became suicidal over the shame and guilt and fear of what was going to happen to his career. So he called the dispatch and said he was on his way to the park to take his life. The other officers heard the call. They jumped in their squad cars. They got there ahead of him. They called me. I was their consulting psychologist, and I tooled over to the place where police are. They have a kind of a coffee place where just for them alone. And I met with this young man, and we talked a little bit. And I said to him, after sort of assessing the risk, making sure he was going to be safe, had his firearm taken care of, we had a chaplain there, and I asked him, I knew if I said, I want you to pick up that phone and call a psychologist and make an appointment, he would never be able to reach from here to there to pick that phone up. He just wouldn't be able to do it. So I said, look, I know a psychologist, his brother's a highway patrolman, a good guy, he works with cops. Is it okay if I call him and make an appointment for you? If I get him on the phone, will you talk to him? He said, that's all I needed. So I picked up the phone, called, got Dave on the phone, Dr. Pounds on the phone, handed him the phone. He took the call, made the appointment, and he was a wonderful patient. Men are great patients. They're hard to get, but they're easy to keep. And this guy not only did very well, got through his crisis and his depression that was lingering there from childhood, but he also ended up with the children. His wife was found not a fit mother, and so he ended up raising his kids, and he finished out his career. So when we protect men against suicide, they will find these purpose and meaning. When they protect others, they contribute to their communities. They have a duty which connects them to others. They're worthy of mission and are obliged to perform, and they pay their own way. Don't let guys off. Make them pay. Okay, I think by time... Are we done? Got a few minutes? Well, let me do this then. I would like to, we run what's called a QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, gatekeeper training program out of the U.S. It's very popular. We're here to introduce it. It's one of the reasons I'm here, to introduce it through some friends here. And it's going to be available, but it's based on some of my early work in the military under surveillance and information gathering. In a nutshell, it's just an idea that if you recognize a suicide warning sign in someone, what do you say and what do you do? And it's what we call an early recognition of a distress call. It doesn't have to be suicide, just somebody in distress. In men, if you know a guy's going through a divorce, you know that's a lot of pain if he doesn't want this. This isn't something he's trying to do. It's something that's being handed to him. That's a time when you can reach out and be very surveillant of his emotions and what he's going through and engage him as a mate and make sure he's going to be okay. I'm not going to spend, I'd rather take a question or two from this, but these slides are available to you. This is an orientation to QPR. It's a very busy program. It's based on identifying people and reaching out to help them, not waiting for them to ask for help. That's how we started this. And we currently have about 8,000 instructors in the U.S. and Canada. We trained approaching 3 million people this year in this intervention. We have a lot of research to support it. I know you use ASSIST, which is an excellent program. This one's quite a bit shorter. But when you ask, who do we need to train to prevent suicide in men, and I'm could be for anybody. But if you look at men, they have fewer social relationships than women, but there are key people in their immediate social network. Their mates, their spouses, their adult children or children, people that they buy coffee from every day, and you can sort of draw a circle around them and identify who they are and train those people to identify folks. Y'all familiar with bystander rescue for cardiac events? You've had a heart attack? Anybody here know CPR? Oh, it's a good place to have a heart attack. The survival rate for a heart attack outside of a hospital in most places in the world is less than 10%. I think I looked it up for Sydney, it's about 4%. And the reason is that if you have a heart attack, the person who sees you go down with symptoms may or may not know what to do. But there's one city in the world where if you have a heart attack in a public place, your survival rate is huge. It's 6 times higher than Sydney. Anybody know where that city is and why? Okay, if you're going to have a heart attack in America, don't go to New York, Chicago, Dallas. Don't go to Seattle. 1 in 4 adults in Seattle, King County has been trained in CPR. You get hit by a flying salmon in Seattle and go down with a heart attack, they will push each other out of the way to try their CPR. Hey, my turn. The survival rate is 62%. Why? Because you have all these trained eyeballs on everybody all the time. It's called surveillance. That's what we call it in the spy business. You are spying on people, observing them. And there's one other place where you can have a heart attack and probably not die, outside of a hospital. And where's that, where you're under constant surveillance? Jail. Maybe not jail. Jail's probably pretty not bad. On a Qantas flight, they're all trained, they all have paddles, there's usually doctors on board. On a Disney cruise, but there's one place we actually have data for. Anybody gets this, I'll give you 1 second to think of where it is, where you're under constant surveillance. Huh? No. A casino. You stop, fall down with a heart attack, they're going to go over there, pow, get that guy going again. You know, So our mission at the QPR Institute is to train as many people as we can. We train now in this bystander rescue idea in about 25,000 a month now. And so it's talk about a movement that's really catching on, as it were. We have advanced courses, and I should mention that our colleagues in Ireland, who are friends of John's, came up with a concept of training sports organizations in QPR, because they lose athletes, student athletes and professional athletes become injured and depressed, and their careers can be threatened and so forth. And so they've been very successful in teaching that program to football teams in Ireland and hurling and others. So we're launching an online training program for sports coaches in how to prevent suicide in their athletes of all kinds. No, you stopped me, John, but I'm happy to take a question or two from here, since we're happy to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Education that you mentioned, I mean, obviously people in Seattle, right, were educated about CPR.
Correct, right.
But how do you achieve such a level of education through society, not just through industry?
Well, I think the University of Washington led the way. I have a faculty position there, but they led the way in terms of a public health mission. And public health took it upon themselves to train as many people as possible in the community at low cost, supported by the university. And if you think about suicide prevention and trying to train gatekeepers, we need thousands of gatekeepers, millions of them, because the person most likely to prevent your suicide is somebody you already know. It's not me. It's somebody you already know. If that person has enough training to recognize that you're in trouble and can start that conversation and relieve that burdensomeness and relieve some of that suffering, sometimes that's as far as it needs to go. So you have to have we train entire companies, they train every employee. The state of Wyoming, the governor said Wyoming has the highest suicide rate in the U.S. And he said, we're not going to be number one anymore. So he trained all 9,000 of the state employees, starting with his office in QPR, online. We have it online, so it's low cost and accessible. You can take it on your phone. And so that's what I call saturation training. And we have universities, 600 or 700 universities that use the program. But it takes a willing heart and about 90 minutes, less than 2 hours to learn how to do it. And we got lots of interesting research going on. We'll be introducing it here too. Yes? Yeah, it's a simplified version. I'm kind of what I want people to think about is that just telling men to ask for help is not working. It's not going to work, and it may be for a lot of socialization reasons, their role models, all of that. But I think we have to retool how we get to them before they have to get to this point, and that is the. We spend a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars, saying the same thing over and over again, particularly to our soldiers, and it doesn't change their behavior. It doesn't do it. So I think the research that needs to be done is what is the fear factor here among men? I haven't seen these studies where what is it about asking a stranger for help or someone of the opposite sex or someone who doesn't look like you? Because xenophobia runs deep and wide in most countries of the world, and it's a huge barrier. So we have to figure out how to get that barrier broken. And as I said, if you can have a toolkit that invites men, when sporting teams look at, it's the players, but it's also everybody on the team. When you win, everybody's on the field. The ball boys, the water boy, everybody. Those are all your mates for that identification of that social network. And so there's opportunities here that I think we just have to accept. My view is I'm just going to accept that men aren't going to change anytime soon. So we need to go at this in a different way. And that's why I'm really happy to be here, because you guys, this group, all of you have taken this, something that's not done in the States at all. I mean, we're not even at square one, with some exceptions, but trying to get entire employer groups to address this and realize that just giving a man a phone number to call is not going to be a solution. It's just not going to happen. So, thanks so much for your time and attention.
Could I ask Andrew from the Hutchison's group to come forward and say thank you to Paul?
It's actually Stephen, but on behalf of Hutchinson Builders, good start. I'd just like to thank Dr. Paul for his presentation. Hutchies are always really proud to be involved with Mates in Construction, and part of today. We've been at the last couple of conferences. From sort of a site level, Mates do loads of work on our sites, do some great work, and have helped a lot of Hutchies employees over the last couple of years. So, may that continue in the future. So, thanks again.